All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. It's great to see everyone here. Obviously, today we are talking about Proptech, especially humanizing Proptech and making sure we put the people back in technology and using the technology. In real estate and development and urban planning, Proptech means a lot of things to a lot of different people. We're using it for many different aspects in the way we run our businesses, the way we use spaces. So I wanted to bring everyone here together to make sure we are using technology and innovation in the right way as the right tool to activate spaces and to help people live a better life in the spaces that we provide for them as real estate professionals. So I'd like to give you an opportunity for real quick to introduce yourselves and give a little bit of background on how you are viewing Proptech and what it means to you and your business and your clients and customers. So Paul, do you want to go first?
Sure, thanks, Emily. So hi everyone, I'm Paul. I currently run business transformation at Revantage Asia, which is the corporate services partner for the Blackstone Group. So at Revantage, we focus on providing centralized services to Blackstone's real estate portfolio companies across the region, so across Asia. These services include valuations, legal, and technology support. Aside from Revantage, in my spare time, I have another hat where I'm the chapter head for Singapore for the Asia Proptech Network, where we try to promote discussions between corporates and the Proptech as well. Prior to that, I spent about a decade in real estate in Asia. I started as an engineer working in Bangkok. I moved into project management. Then I moved to the developer side, where I ran a large development project as a development manager. And then lastly, I set up the investment team for the same firm. So I guess for me, having seen Proptech from many different angles, having seen real estate from many different angles, the development side, the investment side, and lately the operations side, that really underpins my interest, as I can see how it helps the industry from many different perspectives. So yeah, that's me, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Great to have you. Suelyn?
Hello, hi Emily, hi everyone. So I'm Suelyn, I'm head of asset management at PGIM Real Estate. We are a global fund and asset manager, and we have about, for Asia Pacific, an AUM of about $8 to $9 billion. I think personally, I'm very interested in PropTech. I head up the Asia Pacific PropTech Council for PGIM. And I think what I really like about it is that it can actually make a difference in the customer experience for the properties that we manage. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there, given that tech has evolved very quickly and has become a lot easier to use. There are a lot of solutions out there that we're very excited about. And I'm hoping to be able to roll out to make the end experience a lot better for the end user, and to improve our operational efficiency and the way we do things.
Great, welcome. And Dinesh?
Yeah, hi. So I'm the founder and CEO for Smart in Spaces. It's a company I started about 4 years ago. And, you know, we are a PropTech company, so I live and breathe that every day. We've built what we call a digital workplace platform that, you know, is used by occupiers as well as landlords. You know, essentially for the landlords, it's all about tenant experience. It's about tenant engagement. And it's also about operational efficiency and making sure that, you know, we get the workplace ready for what I want to call, you know, it used to be the post-COVID era. I think today it's right here. And so basically here and now, we have built a global company, and we have now deployments in about 20 countries around the world. We're in about 100 cities, and we work with many large, you know, building owners as well as occupiers globally. So I'm very excited about this discussion to contribute, but also more to learn from Suelyn as well as Paul about what really is happening in what I believe is an industry outside of airlines and hospitality. I think it's an industry that's going through, you know, I'd like to believe some of the most disruptive sort of transformations, right? So it's yeah, and I think tech has a huge role to play in it. So
yeah, definitely exciting. Thanks for joining us. And then also just a quick introduction to myself. I'm a portfolio manager. I also have a background in project management and program management. I work a lot in design management, communication, and also change management to make sure I bring people along the change that's happening in any situation, especially in the workplace. Great. So as we were talking about, I think we have a great group of experts on Proptech. I think one of the things that we have a danger of is using technology instead of as a tool, but just as a prop. It can be kind of a buzzword. How do we make sure that people really understand what is out there, what is available, and how they can adopt it in order to make their business run smoother or make their users use the space better? Suelyn, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, for me, what I think is most important is being very clear about the problem statement. I think if we are clear and we spend a bit of time, or if we invest a bit of time upfront to try to understand what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and what the end user really wants to get out of the solution, I think that really would be half the battle won. If we, because there's so much tech out there. I mean, there are a million solutions for things that you never knew you could do or you needed to solve. And if we're not clear about what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve, I think that's where we may get a little bit confused or dazzled by some of the tech out there, when actually all we need are perhaps one or two very simple, elegant solutions to be able to meet very fundamental requirements of the end user. So I think being able to be clear about the problem statement, either through surveys of what your customer might want, or a good understanding of how the end user is going to operate the workflow, I think that's really a really good place to start. And then just being very focused about trying to narrow down a few solutions to perhaps trial quickly and move on to the next one if you're not able to get the outcome that you would like. And I think a really good example would be about 6 to 7 years ago, the company that I was in, we were looking at how to improve a tenant experience in an office building. And what was really surprising was, you think you need all the bells and whistles, right? Facial recognition. You want to be able to do things contactless. You want to be able to have very high-tech solutions. But really, top of the list was people just wanted to be able to renew their season parking without having to go down to the center management office. They just wanted to do it remotely. And they want to do it on their phone. They want to make the payment on the phone. And that would give them a lot of utility and mileage from the tech that was eventually rolled out. So I think really understanding the end user is a really good place to start.
Yeah, that's great. And Dinesh, from your point of view, then how are you delivering or finding out what the end user really wants, or how are you finding what these problems really are?
Yeah, so I think on that, so there are two ways that we look at technology, right? One is, of course, we talk to our customers, we understand what are the typical pain points, right? And then we gather that feedback. But to be honest with you, one of the things that we do is we think of what are potential problems that people are facing or can face as time goes by. Because when you actually start designing technology, you start building it, you build it not for what's needed the next month, you build it for what's needed 12 months or 18 months down the road, because there's a product development cycle. First one is easy, right? You go speak to your customers. I love the example that, basically was given right now around parking. So you go understand that in some buildings, like for example, there's one building we're working, just when it relates to parking, they want to know before they're heading towards the building that is parking available there or not beforehand, because the challenge they had was they used to come and not be able to enter the building, right? And so they had to go and find parking in, basically alternate buildings. But if you could solve that. So there are little things that you pick up when a building is operational. That part is easy. But I think there are bets you have to take. And I think tech companies, if you want to be innovative, you want to be first to market, you want to come up with something new. And I think what we have done is we have, of course, listened, but there are a lot of bets we have taken. We planned last year in March that, we kind of took a bet that hybrid working, what we used to call flex working at that time, will show up and it will be accelerated by the pandemic, right? And so we went ahead and built, an entire solution around it, which today, honestly, if we had not done, we would have been in trouble. Now, if hybrid was not here to stay, then, basically fair enough. It's technology that we would have built and said, okay, maybe we'll see if it can be used in the future. So we essentially balance it like that. Now, as we deploy solutions, I think analytics and data is like hugely critical, right? Because you have to measure what are people using. I think to the point that Suelyn raised earlier, right? A lot of bells and whistles. Some of them, we all get attracted to pretty lights, but the reality is, they may not be very useful for you. So I think capturing the data, understanding the data, and I think more importantly, where the industry is headed to, and certainly from our perspective, is that leveraging on the data to make recommendations, right? If we could recommend to the developer that, by the way, you don't have enough ice cream shops in your building because we found that on the food app, people were searching for ice cream and usually around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that would be really cool. Or that you don't have enough transport coming in because the average wait time for people standing in the queue at about 6 o'clock in the evening is about 20 to 25 minutes. So that kind of data becomes very, very useful. But then you've got to be able to take that, use AI, and make some of the recommendations that are essentially needed. So that's really my perspective on this.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about that, how to make that data useful to people and how to understand how people can adopt that information. So Paul, I think how are you making sure that your customers or your clients want to adapt or adopt this any kind of this technology when it's new or it's evolving and they're not really sure it's going to be useful in the near term? Because as Dinesh said, it evolves and it changes and you have to think long term. So what is the kind of resistance that you see in adopting certain Proptech?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. So I think one of the terms that we hear in the market sometimes is Proptech is a shiny new toy, right? And I really dislike this term because for me, there are cold, hard business cases out there that are rock solid that any businessman or woman would take hands down. So I think, as an example, there's a Proptech here in Singapore, startup called SensorFlow, and they're so confident of their savings that they will install for free in your building. Essentially all it is it's an occupancy sensor that they install in your hotel rooms. And when you leave your hotel room, it uses an infrared light to turn down your aircon. So pretty simple, sounds simple. But they've installed this in thousands of hotel rooms, and they're so confident in the savings, which are between 20 and 40%, I understand, on your aircon bills, that they will do a pay as you save model, or efficiency as a service, as it's sometimes called. So I think step one, the kind of practical advice would be, if you're starting on your Proptech journey, try to pick some Proptechs which have those no-brainer kind of rock-solid business cases. Step two, in the more medium term, I'd recommend that as a company, you try to develop and agree a framework for determining the ROI on these projects, because sometimes it can get a little bit subjective. As both of our other panelists have said, you're aiming sometimes for something in the future. So there's always a degree of uncertainty there. So you need to come up with a framework internally to boil the sales pitch in a way down to the useful use cases that are going to be useful to you as a client. I suppose an example here would be smart buildings. So we hear this term a lot, and it's, some people say that's just a buzzword. And it's difficult to put a value on a smart building at the moment. There are some studies out there, but you know, they might say 3 and 5% premium on a smart building. But I would say they're not so useful at the moment because, first of all, you might not align on your definition of a smart building. Secondly, the tenants in those surveys may be very different to your tenants, and it's all about the value that your tenants put on those smart facilities. So it's about boiling it down. So you could decompose smart into, it's a green building, it's a connected building, it's a healthy building, and actually you could decompose it further. And then you need to go to your tenants, much as I think Suelyn mentioned, and maybe you do a flash survey with them and understand what premium did they place on being in a green building or being in a connected building. And there are other elements on the OPEX side. So you'll be in a green building, you may be saving a certain percent of OPEX. And then you can add together that premium that your tenants will pay, the savings that you will achieve, and then you can start to calculate an ROI internally to present these options. The healthy building ones is a bit more nuanced at the moment because it's so new, and your tenants may not understand fully what that means for them in terms of productivity at the moment. But maybe that's something we can go into more detail later, sort of use cases around healthy buildings. So yeah, in summary, my advice to avoid the buzzwords and getting lost in the marketing is start with something which is rock solid business case to get everyone used to it in the organization. And then secondly, build that sort of framework internally which everyone agrees with.
Yeah, no, I think that's a smooth way to get people to adopt this technology. And I think that actually brings me to my next question about, is it the bottom line that we're looking for? Is it always just the cost? Is that the priority, or are there other priorities, you know, such as sustainability, and also well-being is very important, especially what we found over the last 2 years. So Dinesh, are you finding that the bottom line is all people look at, or are there other priorities that you're seeing clients use to make these decisions to adopt technology or use it?
So I think bottom line is a byproduct. The single most important thing is tenant experience. See, at the end of the day, if you have a tenant who has, let's say, 1,000 employees working in the building, if all 1,000 say, I just love this building, right? I have access to all the services that I need. You know, there are things, it's so much easier getting into this building. It's so much easier finding parking. It's so much easier ordering food. And the list just goes on. Trust me, that tenant will stay with you. That tenant will renew the lease. And I think at the end of the day, that's what at least our customers are doing, right? They just want to deliver that really A-class experience, right? Byproduct obviously is that because people then are using the technology, then you have savings. So for example, on the facility management side, right? You obviously want to make sure that you give them the ability to raise requests through technology, all the tracking, the distribution of those. So things happen faster. You know where the common issues are. So you fix them before they actually happen. You start doing preventive maintenance. I think the point that Paul raised around energy, I think is huge, right? So we just worked with, you know, basically a building in Helsinki where they've won the smartest building award. But the whole thing was around, and they've actually done a really good job. But the whole thing around was, how do you optimize on energy? How do you manage that sustainability equation? And customers there really kind of appreciate that, right? So it's really 2 levels. But the first one is around experience, get people to start using it. That's when you'll be able to, you know, get the benefits of the savings that you're looking for, retention as well, and then all the data you need to make better decisions around how your operations are in general.
Yeah, I think that you tied some of those things together really well. Suelyn, what are you seeing are the priorities coming out of using Proptech as a tool?
Yeah, I think so. On our end, we have different tech councils, and each of them will come up with a problem statement or area of focus that they want to look into. For me, I'm particularly, I'm a bit more partial to OPEX and to have an exploration of technology that can help with building efficiency, with the bottom line, being able to save utilities, because that's actually a pretty very tangible use case. And that does help with change management in terms of being able to get the team on board, your property managers on board, your asset managers on board, to see that there are real savings that can be had if we roll out technology to what is a pretty traditional way of doing things in buildings. I think the point about customer experience is very important as well. Just reducing friction, giving people a very seamless experience that they don't even realize that you're solving a problem that they may not have identified. It makes it a very smooth experience for the tenant. So I think I'm partial to building efficiency technology. I really like tech that makes it easier for the tenant and the end user to have a better experience. And maybe a simple solution doesn't have to be too complicated. Like I mentioned earlier, that car park season renewal was really a low-hanging fruit that yielded a lot of utility. And I think we tried a technology that allowed remote monitoring of construction. It came in very timely during COVID, but it was a very simple solution that didn't try to solve the world's problems, right? It didn't try to tell you that they can track supply chain tracking. They couldn't check when your contractors are coming on site if you have a development project. All they did was simply automate the ability to track the progression of your construction work. And that for an asset manager or a fund manager sitting in Europe, in Singapore, in China was very valuable, and it was a very simple solution. So I think it doesn't have to be too complicated. Good to have an ROI, can be difficult to measure ROI. I find that for change management, maybe the small step would be to get projects that the end user will value, and it could be in terms of monetary savings or making the day-to-day work easier for them. And I think, Emily, we touched about it briefly when we spoke earlier about ROI for the whole industry, about trying to uplift the entire industry. The younger generation is very familiar with tech. It's part of their lives. And if they come into real estate and find out that a lot of things are still done with Excel, with forms, people are ticking off forms, then it's not going to be a very attractive industry, perhaps, for the younger generation to come into. So I think there's ROI in terms of talent retention as well. So there's something to be said about that too.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point about the industry somewhat being old school and people using blueprints. There's still big cabinets of blueprints. So, Paul, what do you think about using this technology to bring new people into real estate and construction and development?
Yeah, it's interesting because so I used to be one of those so-called dinosaurs on site. I used to be, when I was development manager, there's a $1 billion mixed-use development. We had the whole thing moving, at quite a pace. We just implemented an Excel-based paper form-based system, which we were very proud of. And we had people coming in with digital solutions and saying, can we digitize your workflows? So I've seen it from the other side. I'm kind of doing it the other way around at the moment. But it's, in that situation, we actually turned it down. We said, no, we're going to stick to our paper-based solutions. And I think in that instance, we were actually right to do so, because this was a few years back, the technology wasn't really ready. And one of the challenges in real estate is, in development at least, you're on a tight timeline. And there's no slack in the program at all for experimentation with technology solutions that could go wrong. So, or at least there weren't back in the day. So I think to get this moving, it probably needs to have it either has a very clear return. If you're implementing it in a project scenario where it's going to make your life easier very quickly, or you need a bit more vision, probably top down. So from the sort of CEO level, which would say, look, we've got 10 projects on the go. Let's pick one of them to experiment with some of these new solutions. And maybe it's a project where it's not super critical, the timeline's got a bit of slack, and you've got maybe a young dynamic team working on the project. And so I think that's probably a reasonable approach to start trying out technologies for developers at that stage.
That's interesting that you're talking about experimentation or pilots on less things. Dinesh, have you seen any kind of failure, or I don't want to say failure, but when you're trying something new, sometimes it doesn't work. That's how you see what works. Have you seen anything like that, and how have you kind of pushed through on those experiments that might not have been as successful as others?
So, Emily, one of the things that we do is that instead of a customer saying, okay, here's, basically millions of dollars, go build something, right? We actually take our entire pool of technology and we put it into the building. And what we do is we define with them what the success criteria is going to be, right? And typically success criteria is in terms of utilization, in terms of the results they're getting. And actually, in many instances with building owners, we get paid according to that, right? And there's a downside and an upside. Now, that process is very interesting because I look at that more as a partnership between a technology player who wants to innovate, who wants to try new things, who believes that, in our world, we believe everything should be automated, right? There should be nothing which is manual, right? Of course, that's hard to adopt, right? And I think the fintech industry is kind of settling on that a little bit, but I think in the building world, it's going to take a lot of time because there are many variables, there are a lot of devices. It has a lot of working with physical assets, right? So of course, everything cannot be digitized. But I think it gives us an opportunity to put these things in, try them out. And sometimes there'll be things in that framework that won't work, right? But rather than, not trying it, our belief is try it out. We'll take things out, we'll keep eliminating the things that don't work or just don't have traction. People feel that, okay, it's not solving any issue. It's not solving any problem. And so we should basically do away with it. That's the framework that we built. And to be honest with you, that I think that changed the game for us a little bit, right? We have done very large buildings, very large campuses, and we've taken this approach. Usually, I would say 15-20% of the things get taken out because they may not be relevant for that. But the rest of it, typically, somewhere in the range of 75 to 85% will get utilized. And actually, we track and monitor the utilization very closely with the landlord, and even the end users, right? You have town halls, you have Zoom calls with them, you kind of walk them through to get their feedback. But that's how you really get a mature technology deployment done in a large campus.
Sure. You brought up automation as well, automating everything. We've done that and we've taken people out of the automation, but I think what we're trying to talk about today is then how do we put the people back in, and how are we making sure that this is a tool that people are using and the tool isn't using the people. So I guess, Paul, I don't know if you have any thoughts on how to put the people back into the automation.
Yeah, it's a good point. We have tried to automate everything, and maybe we've taken the humans out of the property or the Proptech, and maybe a little bit too much sometimes. And I think there are Proptechs that are starting to put the human element back in. So maybe an example would be in the building automation space, building analytics, where you have companies such as Aquicor in the States, Switch Automation as well, who introduce a human element. So some companies try to automate the whole thing. They'll plug into your BMS, they'll get all of your building energy data. They'll come up with analytics on how you can improve that, and then try to automatically control your building straight back, which is maybe where we're trying to get to in the future. But at the moment, there's some risks in terms of contractual issues and your building manager on site not knowing what's going on if he's not trained adequately. So these companies, they recognize that, and they have a bank of engineers on staff in their headquarters for technical assistance. And essentially, they will read your building analytics, and then they will pick up the phone and they will call your building manager on site and have a good old-fashioned conversation. And there might be some very obvious reasons why the data is showing some terrible energy usage, which the building manager knows. So I think some of the best Proptechs will be reintroducing that, or have already kept that human element, and provide that kind of 5-star service, I would call it, to their clients, and not just automating everything, at the moment at least.
Okay. And Suelyn, kind of this along the same question, along the same lines, is how do we make sure that people are the ones using this and people are the ones benefiting from all of this technology?
Well, I think it probably goes back to serving a need that the end user would want. And it could be something as simple as very good UX or UI, such that you don't have to clutter a dashboard with information that the end user may not require. And I think, like Paul mentioned, having the ability to have a human interface if you run into issues perhaps with the tech, or if there is difficulty interpreting the information, I think that would be very valuable, that you're not just proposing a tech solution and then you leave the customer with a solution that they may not know how to use or to continue to maintain. But I think that there's also something to be said about user interface and user experience, the workflow, how we can just really minimize and to trim down such that you really are immediately addressing what the end user wants to see on the dashboard or in the solution that they want to try out.
And then Dinesh, just again, the final thing, I think you brought up a lot of good points earlier about that user interface and about that iteration, and just making sure that we are designing for the right thing. Do you have any final comments on that?
No, absolutely, and so when we stare at a dashboard, numbers tell the real truth, right? When you stare at a dashboard and if you get data in terms of saying, okay, what's the utilization? What are the user surveys showing? Which technologies are being used versus the others, et cetera, et cetera. So when you actually look at that, right, I think that gives you a very good perspective. And one of the learnings has been that if, particularly in today's world, if anything takes more than, 2 clicks, I think people feel it's very sort of difficult, they get very edgy about it, right? And that's why even on WhatsApp, you find that people respond to you in like short form right now. I think the world's getting a little bit more, sort of faster, right? In their way that they adopt, essentially technology. We start from the drawing board, we, get the wireframes done, we show them to certain customers, we play around with it. But what we also do now is we put it into our living lab. So we set up a living lab in Singapore, where it's not just us. We invited companies from all over the world. We have 89 partners around the world of different Proptech companies, sensor guys and access control guys and BMS people and all that, right? To come in so that anybody can walk in and actually get a full experience of what it's going to be like, right from entering a building to finding a parking spot, to be able to really control the energy environment inside, to doing all kinds of things. You have to test drive that. So we test drive it ourselves. We get our customers to test drive it. We get our partners to test drive it. And that gives us, sort of the view on what it would be like in the journey of the life of either a person who's in the back end or an employee who's coming into work, right? I think that's been really huge, for us to be able to do that. And then, of course, finally, we make that product available. And there's a lot of emphasis on just user interface and making sure that how was my experience? You can't bluff yourself, right? You have to be able to, when you use your own product, it has to be seamless. I think that's helped us. But also then when you put it in, like every week, just looking at the data, and actually to the point that was raised by Suelyn and Paul, right, is it's not just about looking at the data and the data acting on its own. It's about people coming in. We have workplace experts, we have design experts who then sit down and say, okay, what can we do to increase the utilization and the adoption of some of these things? What were the learnings that we had? And sometimes just steering committee meetings and things like that really help, right? But that's how we actually essentially are doing it right now.
And then I think just for some final thoughts, we are all humans in real estate and property and prop tech. Is there anything that you as users and humans in this industry want in prop tech that you haven't seen yet? Is there any kind of pie in the sky or something that you're really waiting or excited to try out or look for in the future?
I think I don't want to have to download another app. My phone memory is full. If you can give me a solution that doesn't require me downloading an app for something that I'm going to use once a month, I think I'll be pretty happy. Quite a low bar.
No, I get you. I get you. Paul?
I guess I'm excited about quite a few spaces in the PropTech sphere, but one is the whole building analytics space. And as that develops, getting more and more advanced controls on the building to reduce carbon emissions, essentially, which is something I think we're all really focused on at the moment.
No, absolutely. Dinesh, any?
Yeah, so I think for Emily, for us, we built one solution that helps you when you're in a room to control the air conditioning and the lighting and everything else, right? I kind of wonder why everybody doesn't jump at it, because of all the things, people love to talk about it. And as a user, as somebody that also lives in spaces, the one thing that makes me very uncomfortable is the rooms are really cold, right? You go into the office and you sit in a meeting room, they're always cold. Even in Singapore, we're always zipping up our jacket when we're sitting inside. I think that's the problem to solve in a very easy manner. Maybe just automate the whole thing. Or maybe you can just say, hey, I'm feeling cold, and the temperature gets adjusted. But I'd love to solve for that. Yeah.
No, that's a good one. We are just at the end of our conversation. I think we've had some great insights from very impressive people in our industry. And I want to thank you guys for joining us today and having this conversation, and looking forward to being able to change the temperature in the meeting room very soon. And I do agree, I can't have another app on my phone, so looking to do that. So yeah, I'm very excited to see where this industry is going and what we come up with next.